With the upcoming release of Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic, I've been thinking about how far the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise has come, from a simple point-and-click horror game to a franchise with a complex, overarching storyline. It's insane how far this series has come. I've also been thinking about how it wasn't always meant to be this way. This series was meant to come to an end multiple times. Hell, the original game was just supposed to be a standalone. Then FNaF 3 was supposed to bring the story of the missing children and their killer to a close. However, the game simply wasn't scary enough, so Scott made FNaF 4 to not only give fans a more terrifying experience, but to show the origins of Freddy's family diner, shows that the purple guy has been here from the start, and flesh out the protagonist from the first game. But the story of FNaF 4 was told in such a way that a majority of the community thought the entire series was just a dream. So Scott had to make Sister Location to clear up FNaF 4's story, and made FNaF 6 to truly tie up loose ends. And then he made UCN and the books, and now the original storyline is more of a mess than it already was. So that's what? 4 times the series tried to end? Well, Help Wanted was already in development at the time of FNaF 6, meaning it was never meant to be the ending of the entire series, but ignore that. And everyone knows about FNAF's tendency to always come back. Hell, some people wish it ended at FNaF 3, 4, or 6. But what if I told you there's an ending I neglected to mention in the intro? An ending that most of the community doesn't even know was meant to be the end of the series at one point. And it's one of the most beloved FNaF games. Well, until recently. That game is Sister Location. That's right, Sister Location was almost the ending at one point, and it is almost never talked about. Now, I've talked about this in my past video ranking all of FNAF's endings, but I thought this deserved a video all on its own, because Sister Location originally being the ending is such an obscure fact that deserves to be talked about more, and it might just have some implications for the lore. So join me as we talk about why Sister Location was the original ending, why it failed, and if Sister Location's custom night was always planned or not. But before we get into all of that, I just want to ask you guys to subscribe. I'm trying to hit 3K before the end of the year, and subscribing would help me out a ton, but only if you enjoy the video. If you want to unsubscribe at any time, you can. Before we talk about why Sister Location was the original ending, or at least why I think it was, we should talk about how I even know it was meant to be. Because most of the community seemingly does not know about this fact, and I can't blame them. The only reason we know Sister Location was the ending is because of a Steam post back when UCN came out. In this post, Scott talks about the endings he had planned before being happy with UCN. I had originally wanted FNaF 4 to be the end, but wasn't satisfied with what people took away from it. Then I planned on Sister Location being the last game, but wasn't satisfied with where it left the lore. Then I made Pizzeria Simulator, and I was happy where it left the lore, but not completely satisfied with the experience overall. But after the really great reception of UCN, I think I'm finally happy, smiley face. So there it is, clear as day. Sister Location was originally the ending of the Click Team era. And yet, no one seems to know. Why? Well, it's pretty simple. For one, this post was deleted, and for some reason it's kinda hard to find. I had to find a video of someone reading it over to even confirm its existence. And both of Sister Location's endings, the scooped ending and the Fazbear's Fright cutscene, feel more like cliffhangers than a natural ending to the series. Also, side tangent here, but Scott doesn't mention FNaF 3 in this post as one of the endings. And when he was asked if FNaF 3 was the original ending in the doco interview, he said that it was the ending to a trilogy, and he could see himself ending the series there, but Springtrap's jump scare was just not scary enough, and that's what pushed him to make another game.
Was this meant to be the final game?
I think when I was making that game, in my mind, that was the end of a trilogy.
Yeah.
You know, I think in my mind, the story was going to be 3 games. And in all honesty, I think Five Nights at Freddy's 3 was where I kind of started letting myself be driven a little bit more by criticisms of the game than maybe I had before. Before, it was just really, really excited, you know, happy to have all this stuff. But whenever 3 came out, I really was starting to pay attention to criticism. You know, for instance, you know, even though I may have, you know, in some, you know, alternate life, may have left the series alone at 3, people were not happy with the jump scare, and it's kind of as simple as that. People weren't happy with the jump scare of Springtrap, and that really bothered me. And so then that kind of, in my mind, I wouldn't let the series rest in a way, because I wanted to make another entry that was really, really scary again.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I accomplished that with Five Nights at Freddy's 4. You know, really focusing on really cool, really quick, unexpected jump scares that kind of make you jerk. So yeah, so honestly, the series kind of was nudged forward by me wanting to improve upon the last entry.
This makes me wonder if FNaF 3 was ever actually the ending of the series, or was FNaF 4's narrative always planned? I don't know. You guys can talk about it in the comments. I'll talk about Sister Location since that's more interesting. So, now that we know Sister Location was the original ending of the series, we have to ask the question, why? Because, let's be honest, Sister Location's ending definitely feels like it's setting up another game. So how could Scott possibly think this was an ending to the original series? Well, I think I know. As we know, thanks to some of Scott's previous statements, Sister Location was made to explain FNaF 4. There's literally this Steam post we just talked about where he said he wasn't satisfied with what people took away from the game, and then there's this clip from the Doco interview where he said,
about this game, it created a bit of a divide between people, specifically the box at the end, and then the TV advertisement with 1983, and then the Bite of 87 debate. How did you feel about the reactions to that?
Kind of like with Five Nights at Freddy's 3, where there was something I was kind of left unsatisfied with.
Mm-hmm.
The reaction to Five Nights at Freddy's 4, and then the box is tied into this, very, very closely. I don't think that people weren't really happy from a lore standpoint. Even though I got the jump scares kind of right.
Yeah.
And the box really fit into that lore aspect. I felt that it had all gone kind of it had strayed too far from an actual story in a way. Me just saying that, I'm gonna get torn apart for even saying that, because people are gonna look at what I've ended up with and think like, you call this a story? But by Final Fantasy 4, it kind of went a little too broad. It cast its net too wide for interpretation. I guess that's the best way to say it. It went too broad for interpretation, and that left people unsatisfied. Because whereas the other ones, there were mysteries. 4 ended up just too mysterious to the point where you really couldn't, there was no real way to figure out what was going on. It left people unsatisfied. And like I said, with jumping from 3 to 4, I knew that I had to go in and straighten that out. Like, people aren't really happy with this. I need to make another game. I need to kind of ground this again, not necessarily in reality, but I need to ground it in kind of storytelling again. And really lay this down with what's going on. Obviously, I watch all the game theory videos. Me and Matt have sometimes had an antagonistic relationship back and forth. I inconvenience him with my games, and sometimes he inconveniences me with his theories. But it's all in good fun. But I'll tell you, he did a video on that box, and he kind of said that he thinks the contents of the box changed over the years. And I bet nobody gave that a whole lot of thought, but I saw that and I was like, he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. The contents of that box have changed over the years because, it's for that very reason. It's because, of what I was intending the game to be when it happened. And then after the reaction of it, I was like, I need to craft this into something better for the people who see this as important. And that kind of indirectly does change the contents of the box, because it changes the contents of everything that came before. So I thought that was an interesting observation on his part.
With this in mind, I can see why Scott would have been fine with ending the series here. It was clearing up the FNaF 4 story. It cleared up if the game was in 1983 or 1987 with the private room, while also hinting towards the final speaker's true identity with the Fredbear plush in William's office. There's also Michael saying William asked him to put Elizabeth back together, but that's in Custom Night, and as we'll talk about later, we don't know if that was always planned. Although on that note, Elizabeth says she's broken, which could tie back to I will put you back together, and right before that the Fredbear plush says you're broken. The game shows us the older brother is named Mike, who is clearly Mike Schmidt from FNaF 1, which will allow players to look back at FNaF 4 and realize that the FNaF 1 phone call was included to hint towards us playing as Mike Schmidt in that game. And if you didn't know Mike was the FNaF 4 player, make sure to check out my video about why Michael is Mike Schmidt and the FNaF 4 player. Also, the game debunks dream theory by showing us a real version of FNaF 4's night gameplay. The final boss of the game is also referencing FNaF 1 and 4 with the addition of a middle vent. Like how in FNaF 4, there are 3 things you need to close, and we play as Mike in this boss fight, so that's another connection. I could definitely see why Scott would view this as an ending if his goal was just to clear up FNaF 4. However, as an actual ending, it definitely leaves more to be desired. What, with the game ending on a cliffhanger on what happened to Ennard after they leave the facility? It just feels like it's asking for a continuation. The game also introduced concepts such as the FNaF 4 bedroom actually existing in universe, and seemingly there were experiments with it. And the original missing children from FNaF 1 possessing the Funtime animatronics, which I do think was canon back then, and I will talk about later. Both of these need elaboration. Also, I guess the gameplay definitely left more to be desired, but the custom night is pretty good, so whatever. So overall, it doesn't really function as an ending to the series very well, but I do think there is some good stuff here. For example, Mike's ending. In this game, we are told Mike is reflecting on his past mistakes.
Welcome back for another night of intellectual stimulation, pivotal career choices, and self-reflection on past mistakes.
Which is almost definitely a reference to the Bite of 83, and he's trying to help Elizabeth to probably make up for that in some way. And in the end, he gives up his body so that she can have a second chance at life within it. Notice how he didn't run away from the scooper when he could have just done that. He definitely gave himself up willingly. I think it's actually pretty decent, but unfortunately outside of that, the game just doesn't really function as an ending very well, especially since it doesn't really tie itself to any of the other games except FNaF 4, which makes sense since it was just made to clear up the story from that game. Speaking of the story, let's talk about what Sister Location being the original ending may imply for the overarching story of Five Nights at Freddy's. And for this, I'm just going to be talking about the base ending from the game, because again, the custom night is a whole can of worms I'll talk about later. One of the things I feel like could possibly be implied is that Sister Location is after 1. I mean, think about it. What would Mike being controlled by Ennard add to FNaF 1? So it would basically go like this. Mike kills his brother, then works a baby to help his sister, gets killed, and is used as a skin suit by Ennard. Then for some reason Ennard works at Freddy's and gets fired, and then for some reason Mike has nightmares based off FNAF 1, and then that's it, his story's over, unless Mike Ennard is the FNAF 3 guard. It just makes more logical sense for FNAF 1 to be Mike's return to Freddy's, and then he does Sister Location, and then FNAF 4 could happen before or after Sister Location. I'll talk about that later. The game may be after FNAF 1, but is it before or after FNAF 3? Well, I feel like if it was the ending, it must be before, because I think the original 5 children, the MCI victims, were in the Funtime animatronics even when the game originally came out. Now I'll admit, the evidence for this is pretty weak when just looking at Sister Location. It really just comes down to the Funtime's eye color. The eye color of Funtime Freddy, Foxy, Ballora, and the Bonnie puppet match up exactly with the eye color of the classics from FNAF 1, with Ballora taking Chica's eye color. There's also Yendo, who is clearly some sort of Golden Freddy variant. He just kind of shows up while you're crawling through Fox's area on night 3 with no explanation. Maybe his only purpose was to show us, hey, Golden Freddy is in this game, so the rest of the kids are probably here too. I'm Scott Cawthon, I'm a great writer. Or maybe it's just an Easter egg, I don't know. Like I said, the evidence is weak, but it's there, and let's be honest, it is most likely canon now, and I don't see why Scott would retcon it into being the case, so it probably was when the game came out. To elaborate a little bit more, FNAF 6 was meant to tie up loose ends, and he brought the MCI back into that game, which would be weird if they weren't already back, since that would just be making a loose end to tie up, so I think they probably were back before that game came out. I also think Ennard is supposed to be the representation of the crime child being put back together, and I believe the crime child was sort of split across the MCI victims, which I've explained before, so I'll just play completely explaining it here. I believe the crime child's memories somehow influence the rest of the timeline. This is a theory called memory victim, and it's been around for a while. I don't know who made it, so if someone could tell me, that'd be greatly appreciated. The evidence is all the stuff I just said. FNAF 4 clearly ties itself to the rest of the games despite being in the past. Scott said he didn't fill the game with random Easter eggs. This concept also seems to be implied in Silver Eyes, which was being written during FNAF 4's development. What? She said defensively. I don't believe in ghosts. I do, Charlie said. I mean, not ghosts, but memories. I think they linger, whether there's someone there or not. And then later in the same scene, I don't know. Sometimes I have these little moments where it's like there's something I forgot, something I regret, or that I'm happy about, or something that makes me want to cry. But it's only there for a split second, then it's gone. Maybe we're all shedding our fear and regrets and hope everywhere we go, and we're catching traces of people we've never met. Maybe it's everywhere. How is that different from believing in ghosts? It's totally different. It's not supernatural. It's not like the souls of the dead people. It's just people leaving their mark on the world. So it's the ghosts of living people? No. You're talking about people having some kind of essence that can hang around a specific place after that person is gone. That's a ghost. I think the bite victim left his own mark on the world around him, his memories, and they went on to influence the timeline. Why was Toy Chica missing her beak in FNAF 2? Because when BV was alive, he saw a mini version of Toy Chica without speak. Furthermore, I'm pretty sure the bite victim's memories are what made up the Happiest Day minigames. There are multiple connections between what the crime child sees during FNAF 4 and the Happiest Day minigames. Just take a look at the graphic on screen. And obviously the most obvious one is the Happiest Day minigame is a reflection of the Bite of 83. It seems that FNAF 4 was explaining the weirdness behind the Happiest Day minigames, which I don't think anyone actually cared about, but it's cool, I guess. But not only that, I think we could say the crime child somehow possesses the 5 main animatronics and maybe the puppet, and the missing children are intertwined with his memories. This is a theory called Shatter Victim. Again, if someone can tell me who made this theory, please tell me so I can credit them. This theory poses that the crime child's soul somehow shatters across at least the 5 main animatronics and probably the puppet, because of how similar they look. This theory seems implied in FNAF 3, where we see that the 5 missing children are trapped in Cece's memories, and bringing the memories together frees them and him. Because of later entries in the series, we know the crime child is at least in Golden Freddy. Like Marla said, he was shedding his fear, probably into the Freddy characters, because he considers them his friends. When William killed the children, they possessed the animatronics and became attached to his memories within the characters. It also seems supported in the survival logbook, where Cassidy seems to have the bite victim's memories, as she asks, does he still talk to you on the Fredbear plush page, despite supposedly not being able to know who the Fredbear plush is. If you want further clarification, make sure to check out that video. And I don't know, I just can't see the story ending with the missing children just kind of hanging out in Mike's body forever. It just feels weird for Sister Location to be after 3 with the missing children still in the fun times, meaning they weren't free, obviously. Then again, it could be just soul splitting, I don't know. See, this is why Sister Location just doesn't work as an ending, it leaves way too many loose ends. Anyway, let's talk about what else it could mean for FNAF 3, in particular, the guard in that game. Yep, I'm gonna talk about the FNAF 3 guard again, like I haven't done that enough. While writing this video, I came up with the idea that Mike Ennard went on to become the FNAF 3 guard, which I know sounds kind of weird, but hear me out. Like I talked about a couple minutes ago, the spirits of the missing children were most likely in the fun times since the release of Sister Location. And it would be odd for Sister Location to be after FNAF 3, because that means the missing children were just in the fun times, even though they were supposed to have been set free in FNAF 3. And if Sister Location was the final game, that means that if the game was after FNAF 3, the kids just kind of live in Mike's body forever. But here's the thing, even if Sister Location is before 3, it's still weird because that means the missing children are in Mike's body, and then Happiest Day just kind of happens and they're free, I guess. Even though there should still be a part of them living in Mike. This is equally as weird as having them just living in Mike's body, in my opinion. And I'm sure this could just be sloppy writing, but I came up with an idea that makes it a little less sloppy. It is kind of weird though. Maybe Mike Ennard went on to become the FNAF 3 guard. And while there, he did all the happiest day shit, and they were set free. I think this is really the only logical way for sister location to really work as an ending, and it just makes sense with what FNaF World implies. In one of that game's endings, the yellow eyes tells the crying child that the pieces are in place for him, and all he has to do is find them. And these pieces are the happiest day minigames that we set up throughout FNaF World. So this implies that the crying child has to find the pieces, right? Maybe he did that in Mike's body with the Ennard and all that, you know? Because you gotta remember, the idea I'm working under is that the crying child is kind of split across all the MCI kids, right? So when they're all put together, he will be put back together as well. And this can explain how the guard sets up the minigames if he does. They can punch into walls and stuff because he's being piloted by ghosts. It also means FNaF 3 is literally the killer versus his victims, which is actually kind of cool. This idea is interesting, I think, although as I'm actually talking about it and like thinking it through, it's definitely not as strong as I thought when I made that community post out of excitement. Like, guys, you don't understand, when I made that community post, I thought I found like the fucking answer to like everything, dude. I don't know what I was thinking. Is it still possible Scott had this in mind when Sister Location released? Yeah, but as of now, it probably isn't canon if it ever was, for a lot of reasons. Like how in Mike's speech, he says he has been living in shadows, implying there has been some time between Ennard leaving his body and Mike's speech. But if Mike Ennard was the guard, the speech would only be like a day after Fazbear's Fright burned down. Like, what do you mean you've been living in shadows, dude? It's been like a fucking few hours, dude. What are you talking about? But then again, there is some stuff that could point towards it. I'll probably make an entire video about this idea someday, so just be on the lookout for that. The final thing I want to talk about is what Sister Location being the original ending may imply for the placement of FNaF 4's gameplay on the timeline. I've always believed that Sister Location happened before FNaF 4's gameplay, but after thinking about it in the context of Sister Location originally being the final game, I'm not so sure anymore. Think about it, FNaF 4's gameplay happening after Sister Location, with it originally being the ending, doesn't really make sense, unless the whole Mike Ennard being the FNaF 3 guard idea is true, and Mike has the FNaF 4 dreams during FNaF 3's gameplay, kind of making those games a dual narrative, but I doubt that. I just feel like the more natural progression of the narrative would be FNaF 1, then 4, then Sister Location. Like, let's really think about the FNaF 4 gameplay happening after Sister Location, with it originally being the ending. There's no continuation, okay? So Mike would work at FNaF 1, then work at Sister Location. That's fine, that's a fine narrative. But then for some reason he has nightmares based on FNaF 1 after Sister Location, and then there's a little bit of Sister Location stuff there with the Nightmare Fredbear mouth, right? Okay, sure. But then that's just kind of like the ending to his story. That's just really, really weird. But a more natural story would be FNaF 1, right? Then the FNaF 4 Nightmares, where he's, you know, all this guilt-ridden stuff, and then he does Sister Location, kind of like confronting his guilt, and then, you know, the ending with him getting scooped. I feel like that's a more natural type of story. But then again, I'm not Scott, so I don't really know what he was intending with the story. This is just like speculation, right? However, I feel like this could have changed. In the survival logbook, Mike draws Nightmare Fredbear under recent dreams, but he has already gone through Sister Location by the time of that book. So maybe it was retconned. Now, that's all the lore stuff I could think about with Sister Location being the original ending. But I'm really interested to hear you guys' opinions in the comments. I feel like there's definitely more that I'm missing. Like, there's probably stuff with like Happiest Day you could talk about that I don't know, I just can't think of right now. So I'm really interested to hear your guys' perspectives on this game being the original ending and what it could imply, since no one ever really talks about it. However, I think there's something that's even more interesting to talk about, that being Sister Location's custom night update. As I'm sure you guys have noticed before, because I've said it a lot, I've only been talking about Sister Location being the original ending under the assumption the base ending is what Scott was talking about in the UCN Steam post. And I've been doing this because we don't know if the custom night update was the ending at some point or not. And this is something I find to be really interesting, since you can make an argument for and against it being the ending to the series. For the custom night being the ending, we have this Steam post where Scott is talking about the Fazbear's Fright cutscene. In this post, he's talking about how he'll release the cutscene when the game is updated. Cause yeah, for some reason the cutscene wasn't out when the game came out, I don't know. What's important here is the end of the post. When the final cutscene is ready, I will give very hard mode a little more juice to help dedicated players make it to 6 AM. Then we can finally see what becomes of Eggs Benedict. Then our story can be complete. Why the fuck did I do that voice? Oh, by the way, this post was deleted, so you can't find it now. Sorry. What's really interesting about this post, besides it really pointing towards Mic Trap, like, seriously, Scott, why did you say we would see what becomes of Eggs Benedict? Come on, Scott, why did you say that? Is the last sentence. Then our story can be complete. This can be interpreted as saying the whole story will be complete with the new cutscene. Now, you could say this is only saying the story of Sister Location will be complete. But then again, you could argue that Sister Location's story was kind of already wrapped up with the minigames, and now this cutscene ties the game's events to the larger story. So this is referring to the story as a whole. Especially since I feel like the final cutscene doesn't really complete the story of Sister Location, like, at all. Like, that was already kind of complete. All it tells us is that Mike has been William living in shadows, and I guess that's the completed story. I guess it gives a little more exposition to what was happening, like with him putting Elizabeth back together, but again, that's not really completing the story, that's just explaining what was happening. It's definitely left open to interpretation. Another thing you might be able to use to argue this is the ending of Sister Location itself. Like I've said before, it definitely feels like a cliffhanger. Maybe it was, and Scott had already planned the custom night to kind of wrap things up. For the custom night not being the ending, we have the ending of custom night itself. If you think that the base ending feels like a cliffhanger, then the custom night ending is like if you were hanging off the cliff with one finger. The ending of custom night is Michael having a monologue about how he wants to find William, and then he says we're gonna come find you, and then Springtrap is revealed to have survived the FNaF 3 fire. And while yes, Springtrap was seen in the final newspaper of FNaF 3, that was definitely left more open to interpretation on whether or not he survived. The end of custom night shows for a hard fact that he did. That definitely feels like it's setting up another game, even if you agree with the interpretation that this cutscene is showing the outcome of William and Mike's meeting in FNaF 3. Like, there's a reason people were like, holy shit, there's gonna be FNaF 6 after this cutscene, dude. Not to mention that in the other cutscenes, Ennard leaves Mike's body. That is something that could have been explored in another game. Also, how Mike was even able to be alive could have been explored. And what do you know it? All of that was picked up on in FNaF 6. It's almost like the custom night was setting up FNaF 6. And this especially makes sense when you consider the custom night was announced 10 days after Sister Location's release. It's totally possible that in those 10 days, Scott realized he was unsatisfied with the ending of Sister Location and wanted to make another game. And then he made the custom night to get the characters on the right place for the next game. But then again, Sister Location's ending already feels like a cliffhanger, and we know that one of Sister Location's endings was supposed to be the end at some point. So it's possible Scott just made the same mistake twice with both endings. Like the custom night was supposed to tie everything together, but it just felt like another cliffhanger. It didn't feel like a proper conclusion, and overall another game was necessary. So as you guys can probably see, it's definitely a complicated subject, and both sides have valid arguments. What do I think? Well, I go back and forth. I can see both sides and understand Scott's potential thought process with both. I usually lean towards the custom night never being the ending, since I have a very hard time seeing Scott show Springtrap surviving the fire, and then that's it. He was never going to show what happens to him after. There's also Ennard just living in the sewers forever, which would be really strange, and overall definitely feels like it was setting up another game to me. But I have also thought it was the ending in the past, so I don't know. I would love for Scott to clarify this. I feel like it's something he would confirm, but he probably won't, unless someone emails him or something, and that's probably not going to work out. So yeah, probably don't email Scott. He probably just won't respond, so don't do it. Anyways, with the custom night being the ending, there are some potential lore reveals. There's all the stuff I talked about earlier, but if the custom night was ever originally the ending, then that would basically confirm Mike was the FNaF 3 guard at some point. I mean, the final cutscene of the series would literally be Scott saying he's going to come find William, and the visual is Fazbear's Fright. If the custom night was the ending, then this obviously means he finds William at Fazbear's Fright. And yeah, it would basically confirm Mike is the FNaF 3 guard. But like I said, we simply don't know if the custom night was the ending or not. So unfortunately, we can't really use this as confirmation. Overall, I think all of this is very interesting. I think it's very interesting that Sister Location was originally ending, and no one ever talks about it. I really want to know what you guys think about this, since I do feel like it has some implications for the story. There's definitely some lore implications that I missed. These are just the ones I could think of. Let me know in the comments, and while you're down there, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.